Good afternoon, my name is Olha Tomanova, and I want to thank everybody who joins us in Ukraine Media Center Ukrinform. It's been 9 years of the war, and today is day 420 of the full-scale invasion of our homeland by Russian occupants. And I traditionally want to thank the representatives of all the mass media who tell the world the truth about our heroic resistance. Our brief schedule of events for today is as follows. At 13:30, we will be talking about the ban on Ukraine grain imports to the number of European countries. We will be talking about the solution for this situation, and joining us will be Roman Slastyon, the Director General of the Ukrainian Agrarian Business Club Association, and at 1400 we will find out about the situation in Kherson region. Joining us online will be First Deputy Head of Kherson Regional Council, Yuri Sobolevsky. And right now we will be talking about the confessions of the Wagnerians. We will see how to make sure that all those guilty of those horrific crimes are brought to liability. Joining us online is Mykhailo Savva, professor, member of the Expert Council of the Center for Civil Liberties. Good afternoon, Mr. Mykhailo. Good afternoon. Well, in short, the history, on the 17th of April, we've all seen the information which was published by the Russian project Gulagu.net. It was a video where we've heard the confessions of the war crimes committed in Ukraine by two ex-commanders of Wagner troop. They were given the details about the killing of our 20 Ukrainian children and teenagers. They told about the explosion of a pit with the prisoners of war and with those who refused to fulfill the criminal orders. So are those confessions enough? Are they a sufficient reason for bringing them to liability, or are we going to need any additional evidences to press charges against them, and how it will be happening? Well, the information provided by the former prisoners who were fighting in Ukraine for half a year, Udarov and Savichov, it's an important information. It has a number of aspects, specifically about the orders for killings of the civilians that they were given by Yevgen Prigozhin, the head of Wagner. But this information is not sufficient, though. For the time being, the Office of Prosecutor General of Ukraine started the investigation upon the facts that were provided in that interview, and that's real necessary because the source is not 100% reliable. Those are the people who may be under influence. In Russian Federation, there is a fierce political fighting going on. The towers of Kremlin are fighting each other. The situation is tense, and it may be an element of that internal Russian political struggle. The investigation is needed. It's underway. I want only to emphasize that I believe that the facts that were confessed by those Wagner former troopers may be true, because there is a number of other evidences of the war crimes committed in reality, and they look very much alike the facts that were told about by Udarov and Savichov. The Center for Civil Liberties comments on the war crimes, and I was taking interview from the witnesses of such crimes umpteen times, and there are scenarios that are very similar to the facts that we've heard. Mr. Mykhailo, what should we do with this information further on? Whom we should address after investigation of those facts? What are the international organizations that whose assistance we should seek to bring the guilty ones to liability for the crimes committed? For the time being, there is no need to address the international institutions. I think that it's something that Ukrainian law enforcement system should do by itself. The crimes were committed by the privates they are not, they are low-level commanders. For example, they don't have immunity, unlike President Putin, who has immunity, and just like any other president, he cannot be convicted by a Ukrainian court. However, Putin has no immunity if his case is being investigated by the International Criminal Court, and ICC has already started such investigation under other charges for deportation of Ukrainian children. We all know about that fact. In this case, Yevhen Prigozhin, who is the executioners of those crimes, they may be convicted by Ukrainian courts. I'm not saying whether they will end up in Ukrainian court, but the conviction itself is quite possible. So in your opinion, such institution that would assist us in bringing them to liability, can it be the International Criminal Court? I'm not saying that the ICC is obliged to take this case, to accept this case. And by the way, the ICC has no conviction, such conviction as a death penalty. It can only be a life sentence. And in this case, the Ukrainian law enforcement system is sufficient. I want to highlight again that ICC is an additional mechanism. It does not replace the national judicial system, prosecutor's office, and other law enforcement agencies. It only assists in the cases where there are serious obstacles for Ukrainian law enforcement system to come up with the conviction. For example, as I mentioned, Putin as an active president has an immunity. In this case, the ICC authorities are really needed. As to those crimes committed by the Wagnerians, there is no need to engage the ICC, in my opinion. Mr. Mykhailo, do you consider a probability that we can use the case of Wagner terrorist troop to have it transferred to ICC? Not in relation to personalities, I mean those who committed these or those crimes, but generally as the case of organization who is being ordered to do those things, to commit those crimes. In my opinion, there is no prospect of that, because International Criminal Court does not convict organizations or countries, they convict specific persons. The criminal case for Yevgen Prigozhin is already initiated by the Ukrainian law enforcement system, by the Office of Prosecutor General, and it's not only the case of Yevgen Prigozhin, but also for a number, we're talking about a number of other Wagner commanders. In case the Ukrainian law enforcement system and International Criminal Court agree for ICC to investigate this case, they technically and theoretically can undertake this case, but again, ICC only considers, they only investigate the cases for just like the one of Putin and Maria Lvova Belova as to the deportation of and kidnapping of Ukrainian children. Thank you, dear colleagues. If we have any questions on the floor, please introduce yourself. In your opinion, meanwhile we have no questions on the floor, Mr. Mykhailo, in your opinion, for us, what is the best option to have this case investigated either by our law enforcement system or to have it handed over to the International Criminal Court? What option will be the best in your opinion? In my opinion, the best option will be for Ukrainian law enforcement system to have investigation and to come up with the conviction. It's important because no international organization will undertake this burden because it accounts for more than 70,000 war crimes. The major part of this work will be performed by the Ukrainian law enforcement system. So it's Ukrainian law enforcement system who should investigate this case. Do you consider an option for those who are plaintiffs that they may submit to, or they may apply to the International Criminal Court or European Court for Human Rights to investigate cases like this? Well, they don't have authorization to investigate cases like that. For example, if someone considers the conviction to be unfair or unjust, they may submit to the European Court for Human Rights for reconsideration of the award. The European Court for Human Rights, they work with France, Turkey and other countries. There are no awards of that type for the time being, but International Criminal Court, they have a special fund for compensation of losses for the victims of the crimes, and this mechanism has already started working in relation to the war in Ukraine. And the people, or I would rather say the lawyers of those people, they may go to International Criminal Court for the victims to be compensated. In the beginning of our conversation, you mentioned that this video, it requires additional investigation because it may be a war inside of Russia which is reflected in this way. But we see that a lot of people who were part of Wagner, they already left abroad and they provide evidences from abroad. So what's your opinion in this case? Do you really see a probable situation that the people were committing crimes for some other reasons? Well, those people, they could say it because they really committed those crimes, but the main reason, the fundamental reason may be something different. Someone offered them some protection and offered them to tell about what was going on. Those people in Russia, they had not even changed their phone numbers, which is very surprising. It looks like someone really provided them some security guarantees, and they started telling what they told us. We have questions on the floor. Can we think that those Wagner troopers who evidence directly from Russia about their crimes, that they act in favor of the Minister of Defense Shoigu, because we know that there are certain tensions between Shoigu and Prigozhin? Well, I don't exclude this option. It's really possible. But for us, what's important is something different. Whether those crimes really were taking place. If they were really taking place, then it doesn't really matter what were the motives of the people who told us about those crimes. We have to investigate not the motives of the people, but the facts they were witnessing about. Thank you very much for this information. We may not agree with you. We may not disagree with you that facts is something that we all have to understand, and all those guilty have to be brought to liability for their crimes. Thank you very much. I'm reminding you, joining us online was Professor, the member of Expert Council of the member of the Center for Civil Liberties, and our next briefing is at 13:30, and we will talk about the ban of Ukrainian grain imports to Europe. So bear with us, trust in our armed forces, and glory to Ukraine.
Раз.
1, 2, 3.